Bon dia a tothom. Em dic Antigoni, soc investigadora de Ramon i Cajal a la Facultat de Biologia i el primer que volia dir és que no soc especialista d'intel·ligència artificial, estic aquí per aprendre també, però volia compartir amb vosaltres una mica el que fem a l'Institut de Recerca de la Biodiversitat i com penso que tenim audiència internacional online, almenys, canviarà l'anglès per a donar l'atzarada. So what I'll try to do today, I am a member of IRB, of the Institute for Research in Biodiversity, and what we do in this institute is explore, describe, and try to understand how biodiversity evolves in order to conserve it also. We are about 300 researchers. And what I realized while I was building this presentation is that this is also a very hot topic. So the combination of tools of artificial intelligence for biodiversity has been increasing in recent years. For example, its implementation, the implementation of deep learning tools for ecology has seen an immense increase. And it is implemented, so these kind of tools are implemented to address all kinds of different questions. So much so that this very prestigious journal, which is Methods in Ecology and Evolution, which is one of the main drivers of methodologies that we use in our field, has recently opened a special issue to recollect precisely the implementation of these tools in these fields. So what I'll try to do in the next minutes is to give you a bit an idea, so to share with you what we do in the Institute of Research for Biodiversity of the University of Barcelona. And for that, I've recollected some studies from my own research and from research from other researchers in the Institute, and I'll try to give you some examples. So to start, I will describe a study that I developed in collaboration with the master's students from Portugal that I supervised. And in this case, what Katerina wanted to do was to try to automate the identification of cryptic species. So cryptic species are species for which we have genetic evidence that they are different entities, that they are different groups, but they are very similar to each other morphologically, so when we find them and we go to the field, we cannot tell them apart. And what Katerina did was use a series of different photographs for many, many individuals of 9 different species. These species are distributed in the Iberian Peninsula and in the north of Africa. And she used 2 photographs of each of these animals and implemented different machine learning algorithms in order to be able to describe them, to distinguish them. And what she saw was that these tools actually work very well. So we were both quite excited because they were actually working better than us, so better than the tools that biologists typically use to tell these animals apart, and they've been working with them for more than 20 years now, and many times I cannot tell them apart. And apparently, artificial intelligence algorithms can do very well in that, and they can classify them correctly very efficiently. So these kind of tools can be very useful for future studies when we want to know what species we are working with. They could even be automated, and in fact, we have this kind of tools. You know some of them from Google, for example, but there are also specialized tools for biodiversity to recognize species from photographs that naturalists make when they go to the field, and we could make this kind of tool available, for example, to the big public, and that would aid us in understanding the distributions of species, etc. But at the same time, as evolutionary biologists, we were quite disappointed because we are interested not only in describing and in classifying things, but also in understanding how they emerge. And when Katerina showed me her results, and I didn't have experience with this kind of algorithms, and she said, oh, this is what the algorithm is seeing, and this is what the software is giving me as a signal of what it is telling apart, this is not interpretable for us, so it is very difficult to penetrate and understand the processes behind this differentiation between the groups. So it's a mixed result from our point of view. And we use these tools for many different things. So another student of mine was using these kind of tools to be able to automatically classify behavior. So she was studying another lizard species, and she had this experiment where she was tagging the animals with sensors to see their acceleration. And she was getting, here we start getting into this area of the big data, no? Collecting millions of reads for each animal every 1/10 of a second. And she wanted to classify them and understand whether the animals were moving or not. And in this case, she was using non-supervised clustering algorithms, and it also worked very well for her, so it's another area where we can implement these methods. From a different group of IRBO, we got this other example, which is similar to the first one, where these researchers were also using photographs and automated classification of photographs to be able to tell apart different haplotypes of tortoises. So haplotypes are genetic groups. They're not species yet, but they are differentiated genetic groups. And in this case, for this land tortoise, we have some in the Balearic Islands and some populations in the coast. And they were interested in understanding which haplotype the animals were, so that when they share specimens, when they translocate specimens, they can maintain the groups apart. And again, they were using multiple photographs from different animals. And in this case, they were using neural networks in order to be able to classify the individuals, and they saw that they were doing very well. So they had a very good performance with relatively few sampling points. Turning to plants, we have several examples of studies of the plant synergy group in Sibio and of the researchers there who are using, so there's a group that has a mixed, this works in the interface between artificial intelligence and botany in order to address different questions. So several examples from their group where they're implementing these methods quite a bit. One of them had to do with identifying the responses. So it's an ongoing project which is trying to identify the responses of plants to different types of disturbance. And what they're doing is to try to substitute traditional methods with artificial intelligence methods. And the reason to do that is that if they manage to automate the monitoring, it will be much more efficient, both in terms of money, so it will be more economic, and time resources. So typically what they do is collect plant species and have to measure in the lab a whole series of ecophysiological traits in order to be able to quantify disturbance. Which is very expensive and very time-consuming. So what they're doing right now is to try to implement, use photographs made by drones. So they are simulating in the field, so they're causing artificially different types of disturbances, physical, chemical, related to dryness, so to the dry environment, and they are using automated photographs and tagging of different plants in the photographs they get in order to be able to associate these with the disturbances and substitute one method with the other. And they've been able for sure to amplify a lot the temporal and spatial coverage of their data, and we are still expecting the results of this research. From the same group, in a different kind of perspective, they're also working with invasive species, and this is Carpobrotus. It's a plant species that you've all seen in Catalan coasts, and it is of interest because it's expanding a lot. So it's original from the south of Africa, and it's invaded many different regions and across the Mediterranean. We can find it in many different places. And in this group, for example, they were using, in this case, classification and regression methods based on RGB images to be able to understand their coloration and associate it with different factors. So to understand why they have this red coloration, and typically they would measure again some substances that cause this pigmentation, which is again quite expensive. And in this case, they could automate the identification of the intensity of red and associate it also to senescence in these plants. And the last, and they are also trying, so this was quite successful, and they're now publishing this study, and they are also considering that this is something that could be expanded also to the landscape level, so to start making pictures and be able to, this could be a tool to monitor the invasion of this plant and follow it and extract conclusions about that. And then, so the last study I will share with you is again from this group, but I also will want to mix it with a personal experience I had while I was talking with Erol about this study. So in this case, what these researchers were doing is that they were trying, again with the same plant, to model its spatial distribution and understand which are the factors that are determining its success as an invasive species. So they were trying to answer the question of where the species are and how they can use climatic conditions. And while I was talking with Erol about that, I realized that actually what they were doing here, what they were using and what she was proposing to me as part of this presentation for this meeting of artificial intelligence was a method that biologists, we use it all the time. So this is something that I've done in my research since very early on, which is that we combine information on climatic variables or landscape characteristics with records on the presence or absence of the species, and then we combine them using some method that I realized is considered an algorithm of artificial intelligence to make predictions about where this species could occur. And these are algorithms and software that are very commonly used. So they are available online. They are in many cases free from major institutions in natural history and in biodiversity research. And biologists, we use them all the time. And the message here is that I hadn't even realized that this is classified as artificial intelligence. And biologists, in many cases, we use algorithms that are classified as artificial intelligence and we don't even know about it. So I hope today you can teach me a bit about what it is exactly and how we can use it, and maybe we can interact and find new ways of doing it. In the case of this study, the study was very successful. Of course, it was using an algorithm that is quite standard for this kind of prediction. So random forests are quite standard for predicting species distributions. And putting everything together, my main message, I guess, is that for people working, so for biologists interested in understanding biodiversity, these methods are becoming more and more useful, especially in the era of big data. So we start having access to immense amounts of data that we will need help processing and understanding and interpreting. The accessibility of the results we get is always dependent on the algorithms. So there are what I've seen from the studies I've been involved in is that it depends a bit on the transparency of the algorithm, but it also depends on our design. So what I feel we need to learn as biologists is how to use these tools. So how to plan the studies and how to plan the experimental methods and the data analysis in order to make the results interpretable for us. And maybe for some things it's very useful, for others there is still some way that we have to walk before we can get to make interpretations in the way that we are used at making questions related to ecology and evolution, understanding the processes behind the pattern. So these tools for us are very useful for describing patterns, but understanding why these patterns occur will need a bit more of work. And this is all for now. Thank you for your attention.